We don't want to be disturbed during this.
I mean, I already am disturbed. Just
Ain't that the truth?
In general.
Sadie, tell me about your week.
My week. Well, basically, I'm on like a social hungover. I'm socially hungover from annual conference this past weekend.
Yeah. Tell the people about it. Some people don't know what annual conference is.
Like myself.
Like yourself, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think you knew. I was telling someone, I was like, I don't think you knew what you were getting yourself into when you volunteered for this.
No, not at all. And I knew that I didn't know what I was getting into. Like, I knew that part was true. So I was just kind of had to like accept that. But one thing I was doing was reminding everyone, this is quite literally my first time here.
Yeah, ever. Because I didn't realize you didn't go last year at all.
No. I think you were like, I don't know how much we'll get out of it. And I was like, yeah. That's fair.
I think I invited you, and I was like, if you don't want to come, don't come.
Yeah.
So what would you, so you're socially hungover.
Mm-hmm.
How would you rate it? 0 to 10 in your experience with it?
I think it's on so many levels. So I love being like special and having a behind the scenes. So I liked that aspect of things. A lot of things were confusing. Like there's a lot of acronyms and
right, yeah, like secret language that no one knows.
Yeah, and even just like within the team that I was serving on, they would use a lot of language like worship and worship leaders, but my definition of those are completely different than other people's definition of worship and worship leader.
Right.
And so that caused me to be confused a handful of times. When they say worship leader, they meant liturgist, like the people speaking or doing the prayers.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Not the musicians.
Yeah, okay.
So that caused some confusion for me
that is
a handful of times.
I thought it was pretty funny. Your TikTok you made, and then the reel of you teaching the Missouri Annual Conference how to do Hot to Go. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
But my favorite.
Well, it is Pride. Happy Pride.
Oh, my favorite thing is that you invited the Missouri Conference to collaborate with you.
Did
they accept it?
Not yet.
I don't think they will.
I don't think they will either. But what if they did?
I know. I was like, shoot your shot.
Yeah.
I was here for it. I thought it was very funny. Also, I would say big shout out to you. I think you were the MVP or Rookie of the Year, maybe.
Okay.
I'll
take Rookie of the Year.
People liked you. I think
Thanks.
Hands down, and I said this to someone, I don't think I'm being biased, though I obviously am. I think you were hands down the best worship leader there.
Wow.
And I don't mean liturgist.
Actually, thank you for the clarification because I obviously thought you meant musician. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I thought you were really good.
It was fun. I felt like the personality hire, and I'm happy to be that. I was like envisioning myself as the Lorelai Gilmore. I'm here to like brighten everyone's day a little bit and like not really do any work. I did do work, but
you did a lot of work.
I did a lot of work.
Grammy told me about it.
I did a lot of work, and it's like fun to do that, but also to know that it's going to be over soon. Like I could not do that.
It was a project.
Yeah, large project. Happy that it's over in like a feeling accomplished way. But I went to dinner with the Owens family Sunday evening, and they were like, "You look tired," and I was like, "Thank you. I am tired." How was your week? What was your annual conference like?
It was good. I'm not really on like a hangover in terms of relational hanging out and stuff, but it was good. I always enjoy it. Like being on our staff, it's just you and me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm less connected to the Methodist world, and being a new plant, like we do things that a lot of churches can't do or won't do. And we have kind of like the frontier space. And oftentimes in that you're like alone. And so I enjoy annual conference in the sense that I get to see a lot of people that I haven't seen some all year. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm not tired from that. I am getting a tattoo after this, so I'm pretty psyched about
Ooh.
that. Yeah, I'm ready for that to happen. So,
where?
I think on my arm somewhere. Yeah. I haven't decided where. I haven't seen the design yet.
Are you a one-arm guy?
Yeah. I was talking to someone at the church, and he was like, "Well, why don't you get on your other bicep?" And there's something about like the symmetry of it that feels weird to me, like having them on both arms. A basketball player had it when I was watching, like when I was in high school, college maybe. And I remember seeing it, I'm like, never doing that.
Never
and
doing 2 arm.
never doing 2 arms. So I'm like committed to my left arm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I thought I was, so I have like start of a sticker sleeve on my right arm, but the specific tattoo that I got most recently, the shape of it, I wanted it to go like shoulder arm, like this, kind of like a curve, and I wasn't willing to flip it, so that's why I ended up on my left arm.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. Now seeing, like, looking in the mirror, seeing myself with like tattoos on both arms, I'm like,
I like it.
this is a problem.
I mean, my vision would be that I'm like head to toe covered, but the center line is all.
Whoa.
Is
okay.
all the way. Except for I have
line.
Except for I have one tattoo
right
on my right shoulder,
Mm.
Which I forgot. I actually was pretty convinced it was on my left shoulder until I saw it in the mirror the other day, and I was like,
That's
I
funny.
guess I've been living a lie.
Yeah. Classic.
So week is good. I was thinking about this though as I asked you about annual conference. This was not in the plan as we were going back and forth thinking of episodes. But we just left the most institutional churchy event of the year, at least for the Methodist Church. But and every denomination generally has kind of like their business meeting, which is what annual conference is. Ours, I will say a credit to the Missouri Annual Conference, to our bishop and the team. Ours is a lot more like inspirational than a lot of others. Like there's times of teaching. There's times there used to be breakouts. I loved that kind of stuff. We don't do that anymore. But some people just come, they do the business, and they're gone. So I do appreciate there's like the relational aspect of things. But it's very institutional, and our topic for today, in some ways, could connect to that, which was around like the idea of like, what if church is too painful for someone, right? That was
Yeah.
And sometimes the institution is like what causes that,
Right.
and what makes it like. I mean, I see people that have healed almost completely from their church hurt and their church trauma, but something about the immovability of the institution makes it too hard for them to engage back in. And so they're not exactly connected, but I was thinking about that as you were like sharing annual conference, like, I didn't even think about the fact that we're going to be talking about church hurt kind of.
Yeah.
And we just left something that like the event on its own wouldn't cause anyone church hurt, but might be very triggering. Like, cause I sit through it and I'm like, we're talking about business and we're talking about things that like for other people are probably big turnoffs religiously. And they're things that need to get done. And like in every organization, things like that happen. But I could see how someone who's not a part of the church would be like, did they even talk about Jesus for 3 days? Because we were talking about budgets and like amendments and passing things and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was similar to that, but I was thinking about the perspective. So I got a chance to interact with some of the team that like the audiovisual team that put all that on, and so I know that was a big ordeal and like took a lot of. I mean, they have a contract with a company that they've used, and it's a lot of work. But I was just thinking, like, what is about their perspective of this event? Like, what's going on behind in their brain? Like, what are they thinking about the things that are
like the company that we use?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I was specifically that the thought came to mind whenever all of us were like chanting in unison or like doing responsive reading.
Yeah.
Which to to someone who's doing it or is in it, like doesn't really feel like a big deal, but the well doesn't typically do on our normal services. Yeah, like call and response stuff. And there's something about it being like the annual meeting is that people are like really interested in what we're doing and used to it, so that like that's the most everyone sounding the same of a responsive reading that I've heard. And I was like, I wonder what they're thinking about that. Like, we welcome you here, God, like all of us in like a very culty sounding.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I get, and many listeners probably too, get the benefit of stuff like that.
Of course.
But I have the same thought all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, if someone walked into this,
They'd
or like
be
you think
afraid.
about the event staff, like not just like the AV people, but like the people that work there. Like, what the hell is going on here? Like, it sounds like cultish chanting if you have no context.
Yeah.
And it is very interesting. And all of that kind of stuff, I think, does feed into this conversation of, like, what if church is too painful for someone? Like, how do we handle that? And I was thinking, like, as you were talking and I was thinking about this topic, like, it's kind of a sliding scale, too, of, like, what too painful means. Like, someone might be, like, enduring a lot of pain and keep coming back, and it's not too painful for them. Someone might have a little pain and it's too painful for them, right? Like, And I think that's something we overlook a lot is like pain is not universal, like the way we experience it. And some of us might have something that feels very insignificant to someone else, and we're like still engaging or not engaging. And on the other side, we might be like up to our eyeballs in pain, and still going back. I mean, we hung out around my fire pit the other night, and our conversation, like with Jared, I mean, part of his conversation was a little bit about like he's endured the pain for like, and it's not really left, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's very interesting to think about. And so the idea that like pain forces people to leave isn't necessarily a thing, but we all have different thresholds of like what we feel like we can tolerate, you know?
Yeah. I interact with a lot of people like in church, out of church, because people oftentimes ask me about my job, and you know that kind of comes up rather quickly. I just always think of like I don't want to be the person to like always recommend church and like be like, oh, just give it another try. Like that feels super icky and uncomfortable to me. But also where I'm at now, like I actually believe that anyone could come and have a good experience, but I don't want to like make myself not credible because I will just like recommend it, no ignoring like negative experiences that people have had at church.
Yeah, I think about that kind of stuff all the time. Like one of the reasons like I talk about personal invitation at the church a lot is not because I think that congregants are any better than you and I, but people, when we invite people to church, like, well, you're paid to say that, right? Like, or we're the face of their trauma, or all of these other hurdles, and the invitation from someone else often can be a little more compelling. But I'm with you. Like, there have been times I've been at churches serving as a pastor I didn't want to invite people to for a myriad of reasons. And it's one of the things that I've appreciated about the Well is like I feel comfortable inviting people from like and I'm in a small group at the Well, and we just talked yesterday, like someone was comparing their experience at some other churches, and they're like, one of the things I love about the Well is when I walk in, people know, they notice me. And like his first Sundays, like people talked to me, but they weren't like too thirsty. And like there's like all of these different things that like are really quite interesting about our community that I think help like as a healing balm to some of that pain for people. But like I also know people that really want to come to the Well. They're like, I love what you stand for. I love the people, but it's still too painful for them. And so again, it's not this like one size fits all in regards to our pain, and especially whatever that pain point might be. Like that's one thing I sometimes have to work really hard to think about is like, I don't know what this person's threshold is. I don't know what their pain point is. And it's probably not even helpful for me to try to be in their shoes as much as I can just like listen and try to understand without trying to like overanalyze it, you know? Like empathy's good, but overanalyzing it's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I will overanalyze, unfortunately, because I take any type of rejection very seriously. Very deeply. But I don't know. I was thinking specifically of like a former camper of mine who is trans, and we'll have conversations in the DMs. And a lot of times he's like I'm so happy for the work that you're doing, but like I won't be able to like show up and join it. And my response is typically like, of course, like you know yourself way better than like I ever could.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Sometimes I'm reluctant to recommend people just try it out one more time because I don't know. Do you think that what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, I very similarly have people in my life, whether it's people that I know personally or in the DMs, like a fair number of those that are like, I love what your church is doing, but I just can't right now.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, you're welcome, and I would love to have you out here, but I don't usually do I would just give it one more chance, because the reality is like I've given some amazing sermons sometimes that I felt like are like amazing, and they hurt people sometimes. Like I just don't know what's going to trigger someone from like a song we sing, and maybe the words of the song hit on a theological thing that like triggers past trauma. Like I talk on a sermon that seems very unproblematic to me, and it hits on someone's trauma. And so the reason I don't say just give it one more chance is like, again, I don't know what the pressure points are. And so if I knew maybe more intimately and I was in that space, then I could maybe navigate that a little more and feel comfortable always being like, give it one more chance. But I think the reality is, like, there's so many different pressure points, and like we have to continue to like be who we are and continue to do the best we can to create a safe space. Also realize our blind spots and try to grow in that. Like always try to get better. But I always try to leave the ball in their court because I think there is this level of like when the choice, if that choice is made to step back in, there's less of a chance where they will fall back on like I was coerced to come or like because if I'm like just give it one more chance and then it's a shitty experience and it's like this is what I thought was going to happen. But if someone maybe makes that choice on their own and it doesn't go exactly how they thought, they might be more open to seeing the good in it. But also it's like you do need to walk through the pain of it too. Like that's an important part. And I think that's what I hope we try not to shy away from is like the messiness of life is like it's not always going to be bubblegum and rainbows. Like there's going to be hard times in church, and we're going to mess up. Like we've messed up before, not handled things well, said the wrong thing. Like I used to have nightmares about a baptism story of like when I said something one time that wasn't a joke. It came across as like a really insensitive joke, and I just happened to say something that hit on a previous past experience for someone completely. But this family's never been back to church, and I ran into like years later at a park and apologized to him. But it was like a complete accident.
Yeah.
But it's like things like that. Like I caused immense church hurt and harm to this person by not even knowing it, and have like had to try to retroactively heal that. You know, so it's like you just never know what's going to hurt someone, and that's what makes this conversation I think hard. Is like we don't know what their story is. We don't know what we're doing that might perpetuate that, but also just random things because we don't know everyone's intimate story fully that might accidentally step on something that could really hurt someone.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, I would say the main whenever I'm like practicing spirituality, most of the time, like the church that I'm at is like the main source of that. But I also hope that like my living room, hanging out with friends, or my friend's living room as we watch movies and eat dinner together, like those can also be kind of spiritual spaces. So I guess I'm trying to think of like a path forward because like while always wanting to like invite people into community, but to avoid maybe like the institution that that's really like hitting a pressure point for someone, or like would be like the thing that they can't return to.
Yeah, language is important, right? Because when we say church inhabitants, we're talking about 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings, right? But yeah, and I appreciate that about you. Like you do a good job, like being like church is Monday movie night. Church is like these dinner parties you'll sometimes have. And church was when we were around my fire pit the other night, right? Like that, I think that was a church type moment, right? I think the church can be so much more. And I think that's actually maybe the healthiest way to go about it, in the sense that like maybe the Sunday meeting isn't the place for you while you're in pain. But church is so much more than that. And like if church is ultimately the gathered body of people, it's not just singing songs, it's not just like hearing a sermon. Like church can be a lot more than that. And that's probably one of the ways to mitigate people's pain and help them heal through it, is like starting to expand our definition of what church could and should be. Because it's not just showing up, giving, listening, and singing, and then going home, right? For an hour.
Or hopefully not.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think your story is interesting though. Like and we don't have to like go, but like you had church pain, right? And maybe it wasn't, but like, what made you able to? It's a weird sentence to say out loud. What made you capable of jumping back into like not just going to church but working at a church? Because I know our email conversations were like, I almost pulled my name out of the hat, like not with us, but just in general of working at church. Like you had your trauma, like, so for you had church pain, and it was potentially at a place where you're like, do I want to overcome this? So what made you able to step back in, and not even just step back in, but like actively help like lead and curate the community from nearly day one at the well?
Well, I do tell people that one of the thoughts that was definitely in my mind as I was kind of deciding whether or not like I'm wanting to move forward with this job was I was wondering if it was too soon.
Yeah.
Because I guess it was a year. I forget that year is kind of a
Yeah.
a
I think
blur.
I reached out to you, we'll say it probably no earlier than October, maybe late September was
I think
when I
that was
reached
it.
out to you.
Yes, because I traveled in October
Okay.
and I was listing my apartment on Facebook Marketplace on the way to the airport.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I had accepted before. So maybe I think September. So it would be just about 1 year from me stepping back from the mega church, because that conversation happened August 2020.
Okay.
That was that conversation. And our conversations probably started September 2021.
Yeah.
And in that time, I would say half the time I didn't go to church at all, and the other half I had started going to a church with my boyfriend at that time, and had started serving. But their request was that I couldn't post about the LGBTQ community.
Okay.
They were fine that I had to believe, and
Just don't talk about it.
yeah, and then but that was also the place that I couldn't lead songs unless I had started like giving.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the experience of like in between. And so how did I get to where I'm at? No idea.
Yeah. Well, what? So I guess.
But
Yeah. Well, another thing, like, were there points where the pain was like, you're like, did I make the wrong choice? Because now you're like here, and you're like in it, and you're here, and obviously I'm sure you're still navigating stuff. But were there moments in the last couple of years where you've been like, did I make the wrong decision? And like something got triggered or stirred up, or the pain came back, and you started to question that, or were you always pretty confident in that? Like, what has that been like?
it's been like a slow crescendo of like me feeling more comfortable and safe. So and I don't know if like my story, like don't take this as a one size fits all, because it's not. Like it's a one size fits one. Like it's really always checking in with yourself, like checking in with your like trusted counsel, the people around you that like you really trust and value their opinions. But I had that thought, and like it was helpful, like talking to you and talking to the other like leadership and the board at the well. It was really just me like learning to trust that like I was going to be able to fit in and even thrive. So I think as I learned more about you and your story, like Jen and her story, as I just learned the types of people that would be accepted, I just kind of like slowly like relaxed a little bit throughout.
Yeah.
So it really was like a very slow and maybe sometimes tedious process. Like I've had to like let Danny know that like some things might, or some jokes like might make me cry, or but and I'm like, it's okay, it's not your fault. But yeah, I guess I would just say like little by little, and it's how you form anything, like a friendship or a relationship. It's like you start to learn people more, you begin to trust them, and then eventually like form really good bonds and relationships. So I think it's more on the people side, because there's a lot going on up here, contrary to popular belief. There's a lot going on up here. I'm always like looking and surveying kind of the situation, seeing how like other people are treated, how other people are accepted, and like how other people act and express themselves, how it's received, and in turn, like, oh, maybe I could slowly let myself like be more of myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I mean, everyone's is different, right? And
Yeah.
yours, like, it maybe is more relationally connected than others. But I don't know that that's true or not true. But I think you're like part of it is all of the people you surround yourself with. I think committing to be like we're going to care about each other, right? Like we're going to create space for you and so many other people. But like I mean, in our personal journey, like that's what I can speak to more. It's like whether it was like a thing that I said that did trigger something, or like a joke, or even just like the way that I would normally do something. Like I think the honesty of having the conversation is what is allowed to be able to march through things. And sometimes I think what makes it hard for people in church is like they don't feel like they can honestly share where they're at and be like, this hurt me, or this stirred something up. Like they just sometimes feel like they have to walk that alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that's what we can always be as a church, is like for not just our staff and our board, but for everyone, like a place where people can feel very honest. And that's not always with me, and that's not always with you, but like creating the spaces where there's always the opportunity for that, but also having like everyone in our congregation be able to be those people. Like I do hope that like I intimately know everyone's story, but the reality is like that's probably just not going to happen. But I hope that our whole congregation can be people that like live that out.
Yeah, like collectively.
Yeah, because I think that's what becomes the healing property, is like we're all in this work together, trying to strive toward Jesus, but also like recognize that we as individuals and us as an organization have not always got it right, and not pretending like we're just the best thing ever, or like we've never done anything wrong.
Yeah. Has church ever been too painful for you or someone that's close to you? Like, do you have an experience like that?
Not necessarily. I mean, like I mean, I'm a straight white dude, so it's like I've had a pretty privileged path in life.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I haven't had pain, but I know, like for my parents growing up, one of the reasons we stopped going to church was they felt very isolated and like had some like early onset progressive beliefs before they kind of like dove in, and like in evangelical conservative Christianity in the early thousands, like that was not the thing to do. And so they felt alienated. So that caused some church harm. So I was like, oh, church people. I remember the mask language. Like that was something I was like, I did not like that early on. One of my biggest mentors just recently, growing up, was very formative in my life. Essentially just became a huge dirtbag. Was having an affair and left his wife and all these, and just like has completely like 180'd from the person we all knew him to be. Like so that was like really, and that's been in the last 5 years. And so that was really interesting for me to like then retroactively go back and think of all my mentors, and then it caused me to like start to think of how I'm mentoring people. Like so that was an interesting one. My divorce was obviously hard, like losing people that I cared about, and the church I was in like did some stuff that they really cared for me for, but I perceived that as punitive initially. And so now hindsight being 2020, I'm like, oh, that was like very nice of them. They cared for me. But in the moment, like it caused some drama.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've like had my ups and downs for sure. But I would also say like I'm a hard person to like, no, I'm like too positive. It's like a negative character trait. And so sometimes it's like hard for me to like be too negative too long, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good thing, but that's just like,
I mean, it's self-aware.
Yeah, I'm like too positive.
Too positive.
But yeah, it's funny now that I even say I was like almost all of those were related to relationship in some way, and like caused me. So, and I think I said this to Emily a lot during the episodes we did together. It's like most of my beef was not like theological. Like I always felt pretty confident in my theology. I deconstructed things and I changed things, but like my pain or my beef with things has always been like institutional or relational, not theological.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even when you were going through a faith shift, like that didn't really affect your like employment situation or how you were on staff. Like, I guess where were you where were you located or working at whenever you kind of started to have a faith shift? And did the people around you have a problem with it?
No, so I worked at like a fundamentalist seminary, and I remember when I took the job at the Gathering, which is United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
They were very funny. They were like, I look back now, and I didn't think much of it. They're like, be careful, those United Methodists. Like, they like were already pegged as like liberal heretics to them, which I think is very funny. But the church I was at, like, I was probably on the more progressive side in terms of LGBTQ plus inclusion. But the denomination and the denomination was more conservative. The church I was at is trying to be more progressive. And so, but no, yeah, like I was always kind of like the progressive one, the far out there one, but also in the roles I was in, and maybe you see this, like I was like the young one that was allowed to do that. Like,
well, I was allowed for a little bit.
Yeah. But did you ever experience like where it's a little bit like, oh, they're like,
they think that we'll grow out of it?
Yeah, I think they kind of, and so like I was like, I'm not though. And I also had an inner circle of friends of my other staff there, and we were all like in one accord on this.
Okay.
And like had like really good, thoughtful conversations about it. Like, but I think having those friends helped. But yeah, my shift, like I remember being an undergrad in seminary, writing like LGBTQ inclusion. We should treat gay and lesbian people like alcoholics. Like we love the sin or hate the sin. That was kind of where I was at, like my freshman, sophomore year. And then junior, senior year, I'm like, well, it seems like there's better scholarship on this, and like theology might be a little different. And I was kind of like that in my early 20s. I was like, I think being an LGBTQ person isn't a sin, but I don't have anything to back that up yet. But I was kind of out of the love the sin or hate the sin world. And then since like the Gathering was a wonderful place, like Matt is a great pastor in that regard and has led the charge in many ways in Missouri for Methodists in that way. And so he was a good person to like train under, to like learn a little bit more about that. But when I came to Missouri, I was pretty much like, this is who I am and this is what I'm striving for. But even at the Gathering, it's like not everyone was hyper inclusive, like, and Methodists were not. Like we were a place where it was like, the baseline is you have to love everyone, and you don't have to think it's a sin or not a sin. In sense, like now kind of everyone on staff is pretty much in one mind on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I've not like really had too much guff for having my faith shifts.
Yeah.
Other like people that I've in my past, like this churches I've worked at, or the space I've been, other than that fundamental seminary, everyone was kind of like on my team in those spaces. Now there are people that were before those times that are like, you've gone off the deep end and that kind of stuff, or like seminary friends that think I'm just like a crazy, like godforsaken liberal,
and you are,
and I am. So, I don't like labels, but but like, so I did a podcast with a friend. This is like pre Deconstruction Zone, but kind of like what birthed it in many ways. She's a church planter, and she's more, she would say centrist, I would say conservative fundamentalist. But she was very interested in the podcast being like, let's have conversations that are like, and I had another friend in seminary like this, like I would have these conversations as long as like we end with like, we can agree to disagree. And I just got to a point where it's like, I can't agree to disagree on this because your beliefs are like causing people to like die.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, just bad theology. So so part of my shift though was like I took a harder stance. Like I'm gonna love everyone, and I'm gonna create space for my friends that don't agree with me to exist, but in public forums, and I'm not gonna agree to disagree with you. I'm gonna like share my thought.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna create but it could be either way on this. Like I just think it wasn't helpful to pander.
I think I would probably agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. Annie and I were just talking about this actually this morning or maybe last night. Like, I do think I piss off colleagues for that though, because I think I mean, my TikTok, our church's TikTok, our general social media, like, I think we're pretty like, for better or for worse, kind of a one-trick pony. Like we talk about, and I think people are like, I think they're like, we're over it. And I also think people are like, I wish we could talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I wish you would talk about other stuff. And we talk about how awesome our church is. I think sometimes we even piss off our own tribe because we're like so unapologetically who we are. and I'm okay with that. But Andy
Yeah.
and I were talking
I feel
about
like
this.
it's listen, it's branding, it's marketing.
People don't want to hear that either.
Yeah, they actually, that's true. They don't.
Um,
It's that and it's that. But sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I do want to say
I think we've been on a tangent.
we've been on a tangent. That's all right. Tangents on tangents. I will engage with certain things like on my personal Facebook. Sometimes I will leave a comment, like if I see an anti-gay post, not even for the reason to argue, for the reason of I hope that if one of their friends comes upon this post, I hope that they can just see that there's a pastor who doesn't think that their existence is sinful.
Yeah. I think that's a great motto. And I think if we're pissing off church people, I'm like less concerned about that.
Yeah.
Like, the people that aren't involved in church, that have been told no by the church, that is the audience I'm trying to be in front of, and trying to, like, even back to the point of this whole conversation, like create healing opportunities for.
Mm-hmm.
So to like piss off people that are like already deep into this because like over branding, it's like,
yeah, small
I
potatoes.
have no time for that conversation. So
Yeah. Because I actually think that it's even worth it. Like, I have no problem for people to even never come to the well, for people to be like, I am happy that there is a church, or in any inclusive church. I hope that people are happy that churches as a overall institution and idea are hopefully changing for the better, for the more affirmative, the more inclusive, etc.
I would agree with that. Someone just commented on one of my TikToks that said, atheist here, comment boosting. This is real Christianity.
Oh.
So like, yeah, it's like we're engaging people that are like, I don't even believe in this Jesus guy.
Yeah.
But like, this is what Jesus should be about. Like, and I would be like, that's part of the reason I think we're out here.
And I think the person who commented is filled with the Holy Spirit, and that's on God.
On God.
But something that Richard Rohr says is that it's not going to be a quote, but he oftentimes says, like, pastors, church people, they like have this scarcity mindset in the way that like they don't want to tell people that like you can meet God wherever. They want to like gatekeep and make it so that it's like you need the Sunday 9 a.m. Like you have to have it, and without it you don't have God. Like that's kind of become a thing.
Yeah.
Said or unsaid, but I'm hoping that like we can shift towards a new model of that not being the case.
Yeah. You don't need 9 a.m. to have God, right? You can have God is accessible everywhere. There's benefit in the meeting.
Yes,
but that's not the only place God exists.
Yeah.
And I think Richard Rohr would be right. And like Christians are often bummed out by things that buck the trend of the institution and make it seem like when we're like, hey, you don't have to go to 9 a.m. to have a faith in Jesus. Like, well, my attendance numbers will go down. Like my giving numbers will go down. It's like, that's not what this is about. Like those things all are important if they're to the end of helping the people that are there and those outside your walls. But if it's just helping the institution, like, then do church somewhere else and do church on your own. Like when people are like, you can't do church on your own, like you can't have it in your living room. You can't, like, yeah, you can. Like, in the reason you're saying that is you're watching people less and less come to your church and less give, and you're having a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And what would happen if we shifted to say, like, we actually believe God is big enough to engage people and make church happen other spaces?
Yeah. There's a girl I follow on Instagram. She's like local to the St. Louis area. Like every Sunday morning she'll post like her yoga mat and a book and like a coffee or something, and she'll comment, or her little caption will say church, and I'm like, yeah,
slay,
you're right.
All right, we've done what we came here to do.
We've done what we could.
Yeah, I think we tried.
We tried.
We tried. What's your final word of wisdom for us? You got anything?
Listen to your body in the spaces that you're at.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. That was Emily's big thing for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Emily and I have a lot of really good conversations about embodiment.
Yeah, I think like I would echo that. I have nothing important to add other than to just further, unfortunately, try to attempt to mansplain what you just said. But I think that's right. Like we walk into spaces and sometimes we're like, oh, I feel weird. I wonder what that is. Like listen to your body. Like, or on a positive note, like if you're responding really positively, like listen to your body. Like what is happening here and start to explore that and not think it's like a one-off random feeling.
Yeah, because I don't know if you know this, but you were created in the image of God. So you should maybe listen.
Play the music.
Well, no, we have an actual thing that we say.
That's true.
That is true.
Friends, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, embrace the journey.
Ba, ba, ba.